Hey Roll fans, welcome back to the channel. I know it's been a minute since I have given you an update on the New York to Trenton issue. I haven't made any more videos since my last one, and I am honestly very happy that I made that video. I feel like when I made it, I was just very frustrated, and after editing and uploading it, I was starting to have second thoughts. I was like, I feel like maybe I was a little too harsh in this, but now I don't regret a single thing. So I created a forum thread on the Dovetail forums, of course, for Train Sim World 4, specifically describing my issues and other issues that I have experienced in the brand new update for the New York to Trenton timetable, and not just the timetable update, but how the route itself runs in Train Sim World 4 compared to Train Sim World 3. I did link to this thread in the comments of that video. I just want to say, for those of you that logged onto the forums and joined the conversation because of my video and because of the link that I shared, I want to thank you, because honestly, I didn't think that there would be enough people experiencing this for the devs to actually look into it and attempt to roll out some sort of fix. But this thread has generated over 5 pages and dozens of others having the same exact issue that I'm having with the stuttering, the freezing, and the hitching, and even on higher end PCs than the one that I have. There were even some players with NVIDIA GeForce RTX 4090s, 64 gigs of RAM, still having this issue. And it's like, that's a $1,600 graphics card. You know, this is not an issue of hardware, but compatibility. So besides other users on this forum sharing their experiences, some of course having the same problems and some not having any problems at all. And what's really interesting is the performance of the updated timetable on consoles, specifically Xbox Series X, running a lot better than a lot of high-end PCs. I thought that was very interesting. The devs have responded to this thread and have even talked about the issues in the latest roadmap streams. We're gonna talk about that as well. I don't remember if I mentioned this, but the stuttering and freezing wasn't the only issue a part of the route, at least the route in Train Sim World 4, but there's this constant alerter beeping that's going off, not on every single passing AI train, but on some of them. The good news is there was an update on passengers, the missing passengers from the platforms, the trains being completely full with passengers. That is going to be fixed, so that is some good news. So the first response actually came in on October 1st. JD writes in the thread, hey folks, in testing, this was pretty intensive on RAM. From what we've seen mentioned, the new timetable comes out around 22 gigabyte load for RAM in some places. The old one was about 10 gigabytes. If you're streaming or recording, that will cause additional load. Also, with the quick caveat that it will likely be worse on your first time playing while shaders compile. I do appreciate though a lot of comments here are on multiple runs. Enabling custom liveries will compound things too. We will be reviewing things. If it is proving to be unplayable for a lot of players, then we will have to scale the timetable back. I'm gonna lie, I was not a fan of this response at first. I do not think this was the right approach at all, considering we've even mentioned in this thread previously, a lot of us that are having the issue of the freezing, we have 64 gigs of RAM. Okay, the timetable's loading 22 gigs, we're streaming, we're recording, we're using maybe 25, 26 gigs of RAM. So this is clearly not a RAM issue. Our RAM is overkill. 64 gigs is more than enough, more than double what is required to load absolutely all the layers that they are describing here, as I'm pretty sure most of that is likely coming from all of the layers and all of the services within those layers. Also, another thing, the shaders compiling, I feel like that is just thrown around so much. That doesn't cause the kind of performance hit a lot of us are having with the New York to Trenton updated timetable. It's very obvious when that process is taking place. It usually only occurs within the first couple of minutes of loading up a route for the first time, and sometimes it'll just hitch a little more often than normal as you're doing your first run. But we're on run 10 plus on this route. For me, at this point, I've had at least 20, and either the performance is still just as bad, if not worse now than it was when I first ran the New York to Trenton route in Train Sim World 4 for the first time. So it's definitely not shaders compiling. I just don't understand why that response was even thrown in here, especially after a lot of the experiences myself and other users have shared beforehand in this thread. Of course, not the response I wanted to hear, but still a response, so I was happy to see that. And Cactus Juice makes a really good point too, you know, like scaling back is not the way to go about things. There are other timetables that are significantly larger, either the same amount of layers or more layers, just as many services that don't have this issue at all. So there's clearly a bigger issue at play here, maybe with the rail cars, maybe with assets, signaling. We'll get more into that in a little bit, but the option of reducing the timetable definitely don't think was the right move to suggest. You know, deciding to take the easy way out definitely wouldn't have been the best idea, considering if something like this happens again, let's say another route, they're gonna wish they would have investigated. So Matt also chimes in, aware of the issue, it's why there's a reduced timetable. For those of you that are saying, hey, it was better in Train Sim World 3, use the reduced timetable. That's exactly what that is. It's what you had in Train Sim World 3. A lot of us were trying to say the reduced timetable in Train Sim World 4 is not running the same way that the reduced timetable ran in Train Sim World 3. There's an underlying issue here with the actual route itself and the version that's cooked for Train Sim World 4. It has to be. The reduced timetable in both games are the same timetable. Matt says that here, but myself and even other players have mentioned the performance between the same timetable in both games is vastly different. So again, another flat response from them. Matt continues, I'm not promising we'll get chance to look at profiling what's going on here, so if you're not happy with the way the big timetable runs, go back to the old one. I know it's not what you want to hear, but the only other option I have right now is to just remove the big one. Definitely not a good response, because it kind of comes off like the issue is with us and our hardware, when that is clearly not the case. It just gets frustrating when you put your hard-earned money into incomplete or broken routes for this game over and over and over again. And honestly, even though things do look promising for the future with them investigating things, I'm still not holding my breath, because I feel like when it comes to Dovetail games and Train Sim World in general, what they do best is selling incomplete games, incomplete routes, incomplete DLC with promises to complete them or fix them if they're broken, but then a lot of the times not fully following through on that. To finish off this post, Matt writes, one of the big problems is the size and weight of the base ALP46 layer. It's enormous now, and there's just no way to scale it back. I already had this discussion with Joe without a total rewrite. I will look into whether there's an issue with passengers potentially, that's a good shout, but beyond that at this point I can't offer any more rays of light. If that situation changes, I'll certainly let you know. That was one of my first thoughts too, the issues with the passengers, them not on the platforms, them not loading or unloading, the trains being full, or the alerters beeping. Maybe that could be an issue with the hitching, because clearly something's not like processing right. For this to be occurring every couple of seconds and freezing for 1 to 3 whole seconds at a time, definitely not shader caching, especially since we're having these issues on runs 10 plus, at least in my case. I'm sure others are probably still having this issue a dozen or more runs in. So it's pretty obvious and has been from the start that there's a deeper issue at play here. Cactus Juice writes they have 128 gigs of RAM. So it is clearly not a RAM issue. Again, just like I mentioned, those of us with 64 gigs plus having this issue, I don't even know why that would even be a possibility. I was a little curious at exactly how much RAM was being utilized for this. I took out half of my 64 gigs of RAM, brought it down to 32. This is running at 3600 megahertz. Even after loading into New York Penn during morning rush hour, as services are going in and out, after removing half of my RAM, I wasn't even using half of the half that I left in. Definitely not a RAM issue. One day later, we get an update from JD writing, just wanted to check in to say we're reading this thread and thanks for everyone who's been submitting their own experiences in here. I don't have an update for you, but all this information is very helpful. So that was good to hear. So, they're reading our feedback. Some of us are conducting our probably not so very helpful tests, but anything is better than nothing. I did a couple of runs recording my screen, showing what's going on with frame rates, where I'm getting hitching, and also comparing it to other routes, especially busier ones. I even disabled all the layers. I took out the Acela Express add-on. I uninstalled Long Island Railroad in my M3, so it's just the New Jersey Transit and Amtrak services, and was still having the constant freezing, and honestly it felt like it was even a little worse. The next update comes in from Cactus Juice. Signaling could be a potential issue. He writes, yeah, and this is something we are currently looking into on the dev side. He also writes, the signal model is so computationally heavy. There are so many trains and so many signals in New York Trenton. This is a possible cause of the issues we are seeing. It's a good thing and a bad thing. I say it's a good thing because the issue could be identified. The bad issue is because this is something at the core of the route. Is this something Dovetail is going to want to invest in fixing? Because I'm sure this is not going to be a super easy fix if this is coming down to the root of the actual DLC. So it appears as though the issue with the passengers isn't just occurring on New York to Trenton, it's also occurring on a handful of routes in Train Sim World 4. So it seems like that's an issue that was introduced with cooking the routes for Train Sim World 4. I don't know what the specifics are with that issue, but it seems as though that has been identified, and at least for New York Trenton will be fixed in the near future. And now the good news, it makes it into the latest written roadmap as well. For New York to Trenton performance, they write, we've noticed some players have been experiencing performance issues with the NEC New York timetable. With the updated timetable, we are taking a look at the source of the issues. This is exactly what I wanted. Tackle this thing at the source. You sweep the issues under the rug. What's gonna happen? You're gonna get them later on either with the same route or with another route. If you tackle these issues, not only do you fix them, you make players happy, but also you now know what the issue is and can prevent it from happening again in future routes, because I'm sure this is something that would have likely happened again, especially on the more signal intensive routes, if that is of course the actual issue at play here. They write, our initial investigations at this stage are reviewing passenger density, signaling computation, and the bi-level cars. However, at this stage, we are unable to provide any more information or detail. So I can understand that. It's at least something for now. I don't think we've received an update in a couple of days now at this point by the time I'm making this video. So I might even bump this thread and just try to see if there's any more that we can learn about this, see if there's any progress being made in either identifying or fixing the issues. They also do write, any improvements made would be backported to the Train Sim World 3 version of the new timetable when released. I'm assuming that these changes wouldn't be with the timetable, but with the route itself. So I'm assuming that's what they mean as well. But I was really curious too to see like if the new timetable were to have come out for Train Sim World 3, if that would have given the same performance issues as the version in, Train Sim World 4. I was always curious about that, but now with these issues being identified and it seems like they're really going to attempt fixing them, then I'm assuming they're probably not going to bother with putting out this timetable until the issues are tackled on Train Sim World 4 at least. So on New York Trenton, the signal scripts are looking ahead 9 signals. So could this be a potential cause for the hitching on the route? Cactus Juice responds to a user writing, you're absolutely correct. 9 signals is overkill in most cases. The areas with lots of consecutive track circuits, Newark Penn to Penn Station, may require this, but the rest of the route could probably suffice with 5 or 6. However, I don't know if some of the cab signal behavior anomalies would be fixed by lowering the value. FYI, Boston's dispatch distance is 5. I think this could definitely be a potential issue. Like he mentions though, would reducing this be okay though, especially for, that busier section of the route between Newark Penn and Penn Station. I think one of my fears right now is, they make changes and tweaks to the signaling, but then introduce other issues in the process. And I just really hope that that doesn't happen. One of the most most recent post in here honestly like terrifies me because this user has a Ryzen 9 7950 X3D, 32 gigs at 6000 megahertz, an RTX 4090 that's 24 gigs of VRAM, and a 1 terabyte NVMe SSD, and they are having the same freezing and stuttering issues. I do have a new computer on the way. No, I did not order this computer because of the issues with this root. I had planned on upgrading my PC all year, and I knew I was going to do it towards the end of the year, but I did decide to pull the trigger just a couple of weeks early because of these issues. I won't lie, it definitely influenced the decision to get it a little earlier than normal, though I still planned on getting a new PC, and the specs of my new PC are Ryzen 9 7950 X3D. It also has 32 gigs DDR5 at 6000 megahertz as well. I'm not getting an RTX 4090. I'm getting a Radeon 7900 XTX, and we'll also have 2 terabytes of solid state storage and 4 terabytes of hard drive disk space. So not the same graphics card, but same processor, same amount of RAM, same speed, and they're having issues. So I'm like really thinking, yeah, I don't think a new computer's gonna solve this. I was at least hoping it would make it better. I don't know, who knows, maybe it will, but it's just crazy. Like these are like $2,000 rigs, and some of us are experiencing the same exact thing. It's just so crazy too, because some people have really nice rigs and aren't experiencing any issues at all. It's just so inconsistent. That's the strange part about this. All right, so let's get into the actual roadmap, like the roadmap stream. So Matt and JD talked about the timetable, I think for about, what, 8-10 minutes or so. I did watch it. I don't remember what they said, but we are going to watch it again, and I am going to have some thoughts to share with you on this because I was happy with the response, but there were some things that I was just like, about. Like, clearly they're looking into the issue, but it sounds like if worse comes to worse, if it's too much to fix, they're not even gonna bother with it. That's what it sounded like to me. So let's watch this here.
So obviously we pushed an update for Trenton with the new timetable on it, and we know it was a long-awaited update. It was something that we were really pumped to be able to get out to players, and I think we still are, and are really sort of happy with the work that Joe's put in to make sure that the experience is about as good as we can make it within the realms of kind of the game that we have. We have seen obviously feedback from players that it is very memory intensive at the moment, and there are areas that perhaps are causing more problems than others. We are taking a look at those things. We've got a few different leads at the moment on what we are going to investigate. The challenges at the moment that obviously the thing that we think is causing the problem, if it does prove to be a problem, is actually something that we can't, unless we remove everything. It is very difficult to remove just 1 or 2 instances of it happening, because if it's happening for all of it, then either we remedy the source, which we're not quite sure of at this point, or we just remove it. So we're going to have to take a look at it. We are aware that a lot of players are able to access it, having a really good time. So I guess one of the questions that Crosstie actually asked was, will we retain the full fat timetable in its current format, or will we reduce it based on feedback?
No, at this point we're going to leave that the way it is, because it works well for a large number of people that it's working well on. Now there are some underlying performance issues with the route that you can even experience to some extent on the reduced timetable. So some of the team have started taking a look at where that might be, and currently we're looking at signaling as being one of the challenges on this route, because it's one of the most complicated signaling systems there is in the game, because most signaling systems have a look ahead of about 4 signals, and this one's looking ahead 9 signals, and that's for every time as anything changes, it's rippling out 9 signals, and across the entirety of the complexity of this route and all the trains, particularly all the trains that are on there now, that turns out to be quite expensive, and is one of the reasons that you get some of the hitching that's going on. So the signaling certainly is one of the areas that we're seeing some problems with and can look at. So, but no, we are not. We're not looking at trimming down the full fat, because you've got the reduced timetable. When I say reduced is the original timetable that we're shipping into SW3, so you've still got that you can use. If that worked well for you, you can carry on using that. And we call it reduced because it's not like the ultimate supreme huge mumbo jumbo timetable.
Okay, I guess this is a good response. I do like the fact that Matt does state here that they don't have any plans to reduce the new updated timetable. timetable. So that's a good thing. So for those of you that are fortunately not experiencing any issues, you don't have to worry about your timetable being reduced. And like I originally stated, I don't think that would have been a good solution to the problem. They need to look at things at the root, tackle this at the source, because there's clearly an underlying issue that's occurring that's giving some of us, including myself, this issue of constant hitching. And the fact that these signals are looking ahead 9 signals when on most other routes they're looking ahead 3 or 4, I'm thinking it's a high probability that that's the issue. But the question is that something Dovetail is going to want to invest money and time into fixing? Because I'm sure that's going to take a lot of work, you know? The amount of hands that they have investigating and trying to fix that, I'm sure that's going to cost them money when those people could be doing other things or working on new routes to pump out, you know? I'm trying not to get myself too excited because I'm just so used to being let down with Dovetail games, honestly, at this point. So I'm keeping my hopes and expectations low. That way I can't be disappointed, but only pleasantly surprised. But am happy that, you know, they're looking into some of the more deeper possible issues.
That's why the two are there. You can choose which one you want to use, which fits your system and your memory allocation.
We had internal names for them where we called them full fat, half fat, or full fat, semi-skimmed, and skimmed, I think. And I think we probably, in the terms of Trenton, you've probably got the full fat there and probably a semi-skimmed. So if you are having problems, obviously we're taking feedback on the forums and stuff. We will be taking a look at it. We don't have any ETA at the moment if we do make any changes, but we will let you know if we do.
Yeah, but listening to the feedback, we're looking into the things, seeing what we can do about it. We haven't got any updates for you at the moment. Crazy Killer, it's less about a core optimization pass. All the things we're finding are content specific rather than core. So it's it's normally if someone says, "Oh, the game hitches," actually the hitches that you see on different routes are all caused by different things. So we've got a new tool which allows us to analyze hitches and tell us kind of roughly what all the hitches are, how many hitches there were, and that's where allowed us to really home in on signal so far on Trenton. So
that's actually really useful. They have a tool that picks out these hitches as they experience them and tells them what could be causing them. So if they're focusing in on signals, and if we know these signals are looking ahead 9 blocks, you have all these services, I think that could be a factor. What doesn't make sense to me is why the performance is so inconsistent on so many different high-end PCs. So many other players with better specs than me experiencing more issues, and then also seeing so many players that don't have a PC as powerful as I personally do. A processor that's not as strong, less RAM, a low to mid-range GPU, a slower hard drive. But then some of these players are also experiencing less issues. So it's just so inconsistent. That's what's so confusing to me, You'd think we'd all be experiencing the same exact thing, every single one of us, but we're not. All of our experiences are different, and I'm sure that's also adding to the challenge of investigating and trying to fix this.
I haven't planned for this question, Matt, but do you want to give us a little bit of information about what that tool is? Is it part of the auto testing framework that we've talked about a little bit about before?
No, basically when we run the route, Unreal has the ability to do something called dump hitches, and what that will do is when you're playing, it will sense any hitch longer than half a second, or you can choose what the threshold is, and then as soon as the game hitches for that amount of time, once the hitch finishes, it will then dump out a load of information about what happened during that hitch, and then so you can drive the route from end to end, which is what we did on Trenton, and then come back and you can say, right, how many hitches were there? And we can with the tool that we've written, we parse that log file, we can graph the where the hitches were, how long the hitches were, and then the tool tries to have a first guess at what each of those hitches are by looking some keywords matching on each of those things, so we can see that in this particular example run, I'm going to somewhat make some numbers up. I think there was something like 700 hitches or something daft. It was quite a lot, and on a dev build the hitches will be significantly longer because there's a lot of debugging and so forth, but it meant that we could see that something like 90% of those hitches were just signaling, so it meant that we can really home in on the right things to start looking at when we're trying to get the hitches removed. It's some kinds of the hitches, like what's called world origin rebasing, which is just really awkward to explain, but it's a fundamental necessity with large, huge world games like this one.
It does make me a little nervous because, you know, they're running tests on their end, they're identifying these hitches, they're recording them, but I'm also thinking, like, are they experiencing the same exact things we are? Like, what if my game's hitching for an entirely different reason than their game is hitching for? You know, like, I think about that possibility. Also noticing a lot of other people's hitching is not nearly as long as the hitching that I personally experience. Like, some of the hitches that I've been experiencing in my game are honestly almost freezes at that point, because it'll be stuck so long, like more than a second, like 1 to 3 seconds, that it's almost like a freeze, you know? But based off of reading experiences from other players, some people are getting much more mild versions of that. So I'm thinking, are we hitching for the same reason, or are we hitching for different reasons, you know?
They're next to impossible to get rid of, but they also don't account for much either. You know, it was a very small percentage of them with this one. And your display driver is going to be, you know, a big hit the first time you run any route. So, but when we've been doing our testing, we try and do it after we've done several runs on the route to make sure that's definitely not in there, because there's nothing we can do about it.
That's what I'm talking about. This is not an issue of shader caching. And, you know, I'm glad they're doing all their testing after they're doing first runs. And clearly, you know, they're talking about having all of these hitches, looking into signaling being a potential problem, and being many runs in when they do these tests. I think they really are realizing that it is a bigger issue than they first thought it was, especially judging by those first few forum posts, which I was not a fan of.
And then we're looking at what itches the game is bringing into that. So we'll, you know, as we get more news on it, we'll let you know. But we're trying to develop the tool sets to help us analyze this stuff and do more analysis of this stuff as we go.
Okay. All right. There was a question about the AI alerter as well being on, I think, since the new update. The pantos are down, but the alerters are on. So we'll just have to take a look at that separately.
Yeah, that will be on the list to look at. And I think you mentioned Mr. Engineer's talking about the Trenton passenger barracks. So we have a fix for that, but that's not in this batch of patches. I think it'll probably be in the next one.
So they're looking into alerters. Thank God. That's a good thing. Passengers have been fixed. That wasn't rolled out with the latest patch, but it will be rolled out with the next batch. So we have that to look forward to. I don't know when that's planned on coming. So at least we have some other issues with New York Trenton looking to get fixed. For the longest time, you know, I really did not think they were ever going to even bother touching New York Trenton to fix the pantographs, especially. I thought we were stuck with that. But, you know, the good news is that at least they're looking into some other things while they're investigating the signals and such for New York to Trenton. So that's it with updates, guys. That's where we're at right now. That's the latest from them. We haven't heard anything else. I hope that we hear something soon. I'm curious to know if there's been any developments, any new discoveries. Share your thoughts and also your experiences down below if you guys are also receiving hitching issues, freezing, stuttering on the New York to Trenton new timetable specifically, but it is even occurring on the reduced timetable, at least for me and some other players that have reported in this thread. And also feel free to join the conversation. I'll have a link to the thread pinned down in the comment section below. I think it's been a couple of days since anyone's posted, so I think this thread could use a bump, honestly. But thank you so much for watching. Take care and happy rail simming.